Hello everybody, I'm Bob O'Donnell, and welcome to the next episode of the Everything Technology Podcast. In addition to running this Everything Technology Podcast, I'm also the President and Chief Analyst at Technalysis Research, a tech market research company. And what we do here on the Everything Technology Podcast is we analyze the big news of the last week or two, and we dive into a conversation with tech luminaries. Later in this episode, I'm excited to be chatting with Greg Bryant, GB as he's well known. Gregory Bryant runs the PC division at Intel and also has some interesting news to talk about with regards to some of the reskilling and educational efforts that Intel is sponsoring. But first, let's get into the news. So, haven't done a podcast over the last couple of weeks because of a whole variety of different factors, including moving my daughter across the country to start graduate school. So I wanted to cover a couple of different things that have happened. A couple of weeks back, the big excitement was around the release of the new series of foldable phones from Samsung. The Galaxy Z Fold 3, which adds pen support, I'm happy to say. People have been looking for that for a while. And the Galaxy Z Flip 3, which of course is their little foldable guy that actually folds into a pocket-size device. And I have been a long-time user of the Galaxy Z Fold since its beginnings. Now, of course, I had a bit of a rough start, but what's fascinating about foldable devices is really the simple premise of you get a bigger screen in a smaller device. Are there other things about it? Absolutely. There's a lot of interesting, clever things you can do. There's interesting things you can do when you have, for example, the flip in this format where you can have a video call up there at the bottom and you can see texting. They've added a lot of those same capabilities now to the Z Fold 3. So a lot of the same functions that you had on the Z Flip are now on the Z Fold as well. But really, at the end of the day, the beauty of these devices, in my opinion, is the fact that you can see a lot more on a single screen. And you can fold it down and you can check out information on the home screen, which is as big as your typical slab phone. But then when you want to get into things, you flip it open and of course, that's the magic of the device. And of course, you can watch entertainment on here, Netflix, and all kinds of other things. And that capability to me has been a big deal. One of the challenges, quite honestly, is that a lot of people, of course, they've been expensive. That's been part of the problem. They brought the prices down, especially the Z Flip 3 is down to $999 as a starting point. And all the US carriers have great trade-in deals where you can get it for significantly less than that. But one of the challenges, in addition to price, has been the fact that a lot of people have seen these things as kind of delicate. They've been afraid to use them, what have you. And some of the big changes for these third generation of devices is around making them more rugged and more reliable. They're calling the frame around the Z Fold 3 Armor Aluminum. They're also using the latest version of the Gorilla Glass, Victus glass, on the outside of both devices. And then on the inside screen, they've got a new laminate coating over the foldable portion of the screen that they claim is 80% stronger than previous iterations. Finally, to top things off, they've added IP68 waterproofing, meaning you can drop it in, a bucket of water for up to 30 minutes and it'll function just fine. So no more worried about keeping your phone, from being rained on or everything else, which a lot of people were concerned with some of the early foldables because, quite frankly, they were a little bit more delicate. These are as robust as any of the other smartphones you're going to have. Can the glass break? Of course it can. It can on any smartphone. But the good news is the protected part, the folded-in plastic foldable display, it's actually thin glass, sorry, not plastic. It's got a plastic laminate over the foldable glass, is protected, and that's a lot less likely to break. But again, the whole point of these devices is to think about that new form factor. Yeah, what's interesting is, it's the third generation. And they say the third time's the charm oftentimes, and we've seen that in a lot of products. And even other devices, that have gone on to be absolute blockbusters in their first iterations, frankly, they didn't sell a ton, and it took a while to really get things right. I mean, our initial iPhone literally only sold about 1 million units, and frankly, for those of you who remember, it was a bit clunky. By the third generation, the 3GS, obviously things have gotten much more refined. The App Store had been added. That was a big deal, obviously. And, we saw a much different experience there. So I think what we're starting to see here on these foldable devices, and Samsung's clearly the leader here, on that front, although we will see others, I'm convinced, over the next year or two, including possibly Apple. Lots of rumors of that. It's getting people used to that idea of a device you can use multiple ways. And on a device with a 7.6-inch screen, like the Z Fold 3, the ability to add a pen support for it really gives you that tablet-like experience as well as the smartphone. And, oh, by the way, although not a lot of people use this piece of it, the DeX functionality, Samsung DeX, lets you actually wirelessly or even wired connect your Z Fold 3 to a large-scale monitor. And you can actually run Windows apps. So it, in essence, becomes like a thin client running a virtualized Windows session. So you can actually have it be a 3-in-1, a PC, a tablet, and a smartphone. Now, is anybody going to use this as their main PC? Of course not. But in a pinch, could it potentially help out in certain situations? I think potentially it can. And that's what's interesting about it. It gives you this sense of, hey, these are where foldable or smartphones are going, to this more flexible type, not flexible in multiple ways, not just screen flexible, but flexible usage models. And I think that's what's important about foldable devices. And again, I guarantee you we're going to see other vendors get into this foldable space over the next couple of years. Obviously, we saw Motorola do it as well. I think you'll see others start to do it. And it's going to be very interesting to watch. Another big item, switching gears, speaking of computing, Intel had their big architecture day last week. And at it, they introduced, they discussed in more detail a whole number of things that they have in the works. Some of the stuff, of course, they've talked about before, but really we got a lot more detail around what Intel is doing. Frankly, it was a little overwhelming. I mean, they had new CPU architectures, new GPU architectures, new what they call IPU, or infrastructure processing units, some of which leverage FPGAs and custom ASICs. So you had more chip types. And they also had the ability, they had new software called XESS, which is a super sampling for graphics on their GPUs. And they had both gaming-focused GPUs and more compute-focused GPUs for AI and acceleration. And then on top of that, they also had more details around the latest developments in their One API software architecture, which is designed to let people who don't have experience writing code for all these different chip architectures, which very few people do, you can write it at a higher level, be able to abstract up to a level that programmers are used to working in, like AI frameworks, and then it will translate that down into the instructions necessary for each of those different chip types. So the big takeaway on the CPU side is going to be the next generation core, probably, a 12th generation core. It's been codenamed Alder Lake for quite some time, and we've heard about Alder Lake for a while. The big deal with Alder Lake is it's leveraging two types of cores, what's called the efficiency core, and the other is a performance core, E cores and P cores, as Intel likes to call them. And they're combining them into a single chip in a chiplet-type architecture. Now, if this sounds familiar, well, of course it is. Arguably, a lot of this started initially with ARM, almost 10 years ago, with their big little architecture, which was designed for mobile phones, where there was a big CPU and then a power-efficient CPU. Initially, that was all about power, in fact, because they're battery-powered devices. And it was a way to get decent performance and yet function on less power. Over time, we've seen other companies, including AMD and most recently Apple, illustrate that you can combine multiple cores in different architectures for performance as well. And what you're seeing with Intel is they're really focused on performance. Even those efficiency cores, one of the things they talked about at Architecture Day was a level of performance that even an efficiency core had, and how, the benchmarks will remain to be seen until we get the final chips out there. But the numbers that they were presenting looked pretty good. It was a pretty interesting story. And so what Intel is doing is combining sets of those. You're going to see 8 efficiency cores and then a different number of performance cores layered on top of that for different markets. So, for example, desktop and workstation may have 16 cores. Then you'll have 8 and 6 for mobile and super small, thin, ultra lightweight devices. So interesting new way for Intel to combine different core architectures, leveraging conceptually at least what some of the others are doing. Intel's argument, of course, is that what they're doing is different, and it is, to be fair. It's a different mechanism. They're calling it a hybrid performance architecture. But nevertheless, it's a hybrid architecture, and they're combining multiple chip types together. And that's a big change for Intel. What it lets them do, not only combine those things in different ways, but it also lets them leverage different process architectures. So you can have different process architectures being combined onto the same chip. And these days, when there's been a lot of debate and discussion around how fast different process nodes are going to move forward in the semiconductor space, that is, how small the individual transistors on each chip are going to be, now you have the flexibility with these hybrid designs to combine multiple different sizes of process nodes onto a single SoC, or system on chip. And we saw Intel doing that not only on the CPU side, we also saw that on the GPU side. Speaking of which, again, they had both a gaming-focused GPU, we'll call it the codename Alchemist, that will be out early next year. And then they had something they called Ponte Vecchio, which is an AI-based GPU. It's more along the lines of for data center acceleration. And what's fascinating about Ponte Vecchio is not only is it new GPU architecture advancements, it's also combining a whole bunch of process advancements. Again, not only combining those different chips, but chip stacking, of which Intel calls Foveros. EMIB, which is a fast interconnect between different pieces. So Ponte Vecchio combines basically all the tricks that Intel's come out with recently into a single SoC, and we'll see that later next year. But again, they were showing some pretty impressive numbers in terms of what theoretically it's going to be capable of. So that's going to be interesting to watch as well. Other big thing I want to talk about briefly is I did a piece for Forbes last week on 5G. I mean, one of the interesting things, I've been covering 5G quite a bit over the last couple of years. And look, to be honest, and this is the way I started the article, it's been pretty disappointing. We're not really seeing the kinds of things that we really need to see when it comes to 5G, because it's slightly faster downloads. In some parts of the country, you can get 5G-based broadband, which is super cool, and that's going to be more important. And in a few sporting arenas, you can get, these kind of cool apps that, frankly, are more of a demo. You can switch video shots. You can be the producer, as it were, of your own TV view of seeing replays and other things from different angles. It's cool, but, it's not going to change our day-to-day lives. And that's what people have been expecting from 5G. So in this article that I wrote for it, which I'll link to below, I call it 5G requires big picture thinking. And my point is that 5G on its own, not enough. It's not good enough to just have faster downloads and slightly better latency. We've got to combine it with edge computing and with AI. And that triumvirate, that unification of those three big things, even though it's kind of a buzzword bingo, that's what it's going to take, I believe, to really make 5G happen. So anyway, I encourage you to check out the piece and start to think a little bit differently about 5G. One other item I wanted to get to was this Tesla bot. I'm sure you heard about this. So Elon Musk, in his inimitable way, announces they have this big AI day where they're talking about their advancements in autopilot, which, by the way, I want to get into in a second. And then they also say, oh, and by the way, we're going to take autopilot, the concept of robotics really is inside our car, and we're going to turn that into a humanoid robot. And yet they brought out a human being, dressed in a robot costume who danced. And they said, we're going to do something like this. I really, really don't get it sometimes. I got to be honest with you. And particularly because the claims that Tesla is making about autopilot are so far from reality. And of course, now they're being investigated by the government. And I've been saying this for years, but it bears repeating. There's no such thing as semi-autonomous driving. And autopilot implies that I don't have to do anything as the pilot. I can just, walk away. People, sleep in the backseat of the car. We've seen all these horrific stories and videos about these things happening. And unfortunately, we've seen even more horrific stories of people dying, from doing that, or from the fact that the autopilot can't tell, for example, when parked emergency vehicles are nearby. So the challenge is, when you say you're autonomous, it has to be fully autonomous. We're not there. We're not going to be there for a long time. The autonomy that we have is semi-autonomous. The problem is you still have to concentrate as the driver. You have to have your hands by or near the wheel in order to take over immediately. Problem is people get lulled into thinking, oh, the car is doing everything. And that's an extraordinarily dangerous situation. And unfortunately, that's where we are. That's where the Tesla autopilot is, despite what a lot of folks claim. And that's where all the other autonomous systems are. And it's going to be extraordinarily hard to overcome that. So then when you say you're going to take some of that technology and put it into a humanoid robot, wow. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm excited about the possibility of robots, and I think we're going to see some interesting robotic developments over the next 6 months to a year, but on a much smaller scale when it comes to, a consumer market. And then, of course, factory-based robotics has been ongoing and developing for many, many years now, and we are seeing important advances. But it's going to be interesting, and we got to do a little fact-checking in terms of the claims that tech companies are making, because when things get brought out too far, it hurts the credibility of all the efforts that are genuinely trying to move some of these areas forward. So I think that's something we need to be aware of. All right, we're going to take a quick pause here, and coming up in the next segment, again, I'm going to be talking to Gregory Bryant. He runs the entire PC division for Intel, and we're going to talk about some of the cool things that Intel is doing on the reskilling and training front, speaking of AI, when it comes to AI programming at community colleges. Hello, everybody. This is Bob O'Donnell, and welcome to the interview portion of the Everything Technology podcast. Very pleased and excited to be joined by Mr. Gregory Bryant, otherwise known as GB, the Executive Vice President of the Client Division at Intel. In other words, he runs all the PC business. But we're here today to start out with to talk about a different subject, which is also, very important, GB, and that's about upskilling. And one of the things that we've seen with the pandemic, and we've seen a lot of tech companies start to address this issue, is the fact that the pandemic has dramatically changed the types of skills that are required. Some jobs are going away, but new jobs are being created. And a lot of tech companies recognize that, and they're making efforts in a number of different ways to address that. So, GB, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining. And why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of kind of how Intel has been thinking about this problem of upskilling, and then we can get to the details of the program.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Bob, thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk to you, and thanks for having me on. First, I would just say, certainly it is, as I've said, it may be the most important time really ever to work on upskilling American workers. And as you said, COVID has really, accelerated the rate of change. That's how I like to think about it. A lot of the trends that exist now in the world today started before COVID, but COVID kind of dramatically accelerated, the digitization, if you will, of many, many industries, which of course is then resulting in the need for new skills. It's creating new kinds of jobs while, other jobs may be impacted negatively. So at Intel, the way we've thought about it is it's more important than ever to get Americans the skills they need for the future of technology. And one of those areas that we focused on is artificial intelligence and machine learning. And, that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was, this effort that we have to use community colleges as a way to scale and create access for these artificial intelligence and machine learning skills that are going to be required for so many of the future jobs out there.
And this is something that you guys actually started last year, as I recall, and then you're expanding it this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So last year we partnered with the Maricopa County Community College District, which is the largest community college district in the United States, to create this associate's degree, a 2-year associate's degree in artificial intelligence with them. Fantastic program. And what we're doing now is we're expanding that program to 18 community colleges across the United States. Those community colleges in total have around 800,000 students registered today, and we're training the faculty and developing curriculum with those community colleges in order to provide this associate's degree in artificial intelligence. And like I said in the intro, the demand for these skills is growing quite rapidly. We've done some studies with our partners in the industry that say AI, machine learning skills are expected to grow faster than any other IT area over the next 3 years. So that just kind of gives you the magnitude and the potential that's there, and why we've got to really focus on serving these needs.
Well, and what's interesting about this is that you've got these situations where you've got students who, and adults as well, who, may have never even considered getting into the tech industry. But when you do it through a community college, it opens doors because, a lot of people associate doing that kind of programming work with needing a 4-year degree at an advanced school and what have you. So this really does open a lot of doors to a lot of different people.
No, that's right. I mean, this is really breakthrough training, breakthrough, skills development. And you're right. By targeting community colleges, the associate's degree, it really makes this kind of skill set, this kind of training more accessible. It's more affordable. Community colleges obviously attract a very, very diverse population of students, all walks and phases of life, all backgrounds, all kinds of experiences, right? Very inclusive, diverse setting, which we believe, one, is great for the students themselves, attracting this wide, range of students. But B, it's important for in the field of artificial intelligence and machine learning to have a wide variety of people, in the profession and participating, so that we get, kind of fair, balanced, solutions in the marketplace. So we're very excited to be doing it. As you said, it really, I think, dramatically improves the accessibility. And maybe just to double click a little bit, Bob, we're really covering a wide range of topics in the program, everything from, the societal impacts and some of the questions and issues around artificial intelligence and machine learning, all the way to in the lab learning programming and skills and tools like using Python and OpenVINO and training and creating models and data collection and then a capstone project at the end with a member of the faculty and an Intel mentor. So we're really trying to cover the gamut and kind of turbocharge the ability to acquire these skills. And I really think it's revolutionary.
Well, that's great. And I mean, can you give few more details on, say, the type of class load that someone's going to have? I mean, are there prerequisites? Do they have to have a certain amount of math or science before they can get into this? Or is it the full 2 years? Like if someone has started something else and then they decide they want to pursue this, do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, at the highest level, I mean, obviously you would expect that, folks who are interested in computer science or, electronics or those kind of related areas, I think those folks you'd naturally expect, oh yeah, they're going to have great interest in AI and machine learning, which is true. But actually, we also expect, because AI and machine learning are impacting such a wide variety of industries. I mean, you think about today with, medicine and healthcare and everything we're doing to fight COVID, to, industrial automation and consumer electronics and retail and, manufacturing. I think we're going to see a wide variety of students who are interested either in the full degree and taking 2 years of the degree, or in aspects of the coursework that I think are going to help improve their knowledge and their skill set and their ability to get a job after the program overall. So I think it actually has very general applicability, which is one of the reasons it's so exciting.
Well, and speaking of which, does Intel have any plan in place to kind of bring people from this program into Intel? I mean, one of the things that most people don't know about Intel is it has more software engineers than it does hardware engineers. And so I'm just curious if there is sort of a career path potentially even out in from this program into something at Intel or perhaps other, partner companies that Intel works with.
Oh no, I definitely think there's a career path. I mean, one of the things, two things that are not widely known about Intel. One, we have a ton of software engineers, as you said. Everybody thinks about us as a hardware company. We have thousands and thousands of software engineers. The other thing, as I say, is we employ a large number of people in the company that have associate's degrees around our manufacturing area, which is highly skilled manufacturing, right? You know that semiconductors, some of the most complex things built by human beings on this planet. And the people we have in manufacturing largely have associate's degrees. So we're no stranger to hiring folks with an AA degree focused in technology. And I think this will be an extension of that as we go forward and we're able to bring people into our company. And I expect, a lot of our partner company, ecosystem partner companies as well.
Got it. And the other big thing about AI, and this has been in the news a lot lately, is concerns about bias in AI, and so I think it's really important that you're focusing as well on underrepresented communities because that's how you can get bias out of algorithms that are being used for AI. If you've got more people with more diverse backgrounds doing the work to drive this, because that's clearly been an issue we've seen up to now.
That's right. And at this company, absolute believers in that, Bob. I think you hit it right on. I mean, that's why it's not just a technical program. That's why we are discussing some of the societal impacts and challenges and, really having a discussion about AI and its application in general, which I think arms people with the context and the framework to think about those issues. And then secondly, it's how do we get a more diverse set of professionals in the industry working on AI and ML solutions. And, I run the PC business at Intel. I've talked many, many times. And, I'm a big believer in, the groups that create these solutions and these products for the market. The more they can look and they can look like, the consumers and the industries they're serving, the better. And and that to me, that's systemic and we need to be systematic. And this program is, I think, key to addressing some of those challenges in the end.
That's great. One last question on the program. Are there any scholarships available? Is Intel doing any of that for folks who may need financial support?
Well, right now, the biggest focus is on getting the community colleges ramped up and going. Again, we're in the middle of a huge expansion. And then what we thought was going to be the most valuable, and we got this as we went out and talked to the administrators in these institutions, is really the internships, sponsorships, and then help with job placement. So, I think where we're going to focus is really on helping people through the program, giving them internships at Intel and through partners, and then partnering with the colleges on job placement so we can get these students into great jobs. And then I think it becomes this, self-fulfilling, this great flywheel that turns that gets people going. So that's our focus today.
I have to take advantage of the fact that I have GB here, the guy in charge of the whole PC division of Intel. You just had great PC earnings. So give us a quick sense of where you see things going with the PC market.
Yeah, I think I see sustained momentum in the PC market. Obviously, we've seen incredible growth in the market, on the back of COVID. And as I said, it's not a one-time event. COVID didn't create really new trends. It just accelerated some trends that were already there. And we've seen the use of personal computers go up. I think with hybrid work going forward, with commercial coming back and GDP, expected to grow, I expect kind of sustained momentum in the business. Obviously, we won't see the massive, year-on-year growth that we saw, from 20 into 21. But I expect continued momentum in the PC business. And, probably one of the untold stories, Bob, as you know, is I think some people had this model that was like, it was a refresh acceleration, like people who were going to buy just pulled in their purchases and now they're done. But in fact, what it was density. It was people not wanting to share. And whether that was, mom and dad and kids at home, or whether that was students in a classroom, the need for computing devices has just gone up. We call that density, as people really want their own device, and it's become essential for them to work, to play, to learn, to communicate and collaborate. And I think there's durability in that trend over time. So we're excited about the future of the PC and of the client, and we're driving some fantastic innovation with our partners. And obviously, I won't tell anything too confidential, Bob. But I think as we get into Intel On events, we have our big innovation event coming up in October, and then followed by CES in January. I think you'll see some really exciting innovation from us and our partners.
Sounds good. I'm guessing some of it is going to be related to AI. That would be my guess.
Some of it is absolutely related to AI. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, thank you, GB. Really appreciate you spending the time talking with us, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. I appreciate it. Take care.